don't say anything, Lawrence, 'cause I'm going to make an introduction. I don't want your voice in the recording.
Now we're recording.
Welcome, everybody, to our first Silicon Valley Electric Vehicle Association meeting of 2024. We have a fabulous guest speaker today, Linda Hutchins-Knowles, and without any further ado, I'll let her begin.
So welcome. Good to see you all here. I'm excited to talk with you today about how we can expand access to at-home EV charging, especially through using building codes, especially in making sure they're equitable. And make sure I can advance the screen. So here's what we're going to be talking about. Why are building codes key to EV adoption and equity? What are the pillars of equitable EV building codes? How has CalGreen increased access to charging in multifamily housing? What opportunity do we have now to ensure that San Jose's proposed REACH code is equitable? So I'll dive right in by just introducing myself and a little bit more about who I am. My name's Linda Hutchins-Knowles. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the multifamily housing senior manager for Charge Across Town, a Bay Area nonprofit that does a lot of EV ride and drives. And my role is to educate apartment and condo residents about electric vehicles and the benefits and EV charging solutions. Also, I'm the co-lead for the EV Charging for All Coalition. I volunteer with this amazing group. You'll hear more about us. And I'm also the co-founder and team coordinator of Mothers Out Front Silicon Valley. I live in San Jose and I've been an EV driver since 2012. So a bit about the two groups I represent. Mothers Out Front Silicon Valley, in case you don't know us, we're a local grassroots organization that works to build our power as mothers and allies to ensure a livable climate for all children. We were named San Jose's 2019, Climate Smart champion in 2019. And we've been advocating for San Jose's EV REACH code since the first edition in 2019. And for the past year, working to get it strengthened for the next edition. As I mentioned, I'm part of the EV Charging for All Coalition. This is a fantastic organization that's a nonprofit. It's actually not its own nonprofit. We're under the wing of Actera. And we have a very simple mission, which is equitable EV charging for all. We have a very highly experienced leadership team. The group was co-founded by Sven Thiessen and Vanessa Warheit. And we have a team of about 10 folks that are really skilled, ex-SMUD, ex-PG&E, ex-PCE, kind of geeks. And then we have organizers like myself and residents of multifamily housing that give us valuable lived experience or share their lived experience with us. And we're supported by 1,400 organizations, elected officials, and residents. And we have secured huge advances to states' building codes, multifamily housing. You'll be hearing about that today in today's talk. And we also have created a model buildings codes toolkit that's helping on the national level to expand this nationally. Yeah, I got a thumbs up from the audience here. I'm preaching to the choir with this group. I absolutely know that. So I don't have to tell you that transportation is the biggest cause of greenhouse gas emissions and pollutants in our area. I think everybody on this call either drives an EV or supports EV drivers. And also wanting to point out that it's not just a climate issue, but it's an environmental justice issue because neighborhoods near highways have the worst air quality. As you all know, that by 2035, all new vehicles sold in the state of California must be zero emission. And we have some intermediary targets, which I'm happy to say we are on target toward meeting. Here in San Jose, where I live, about 1/3 of all new vehicles sold are electric vehicles. I think we're the leading city in the nation. However, not everybody has access to electric vehicles. As this chart shows, the majority of EV drivers live in single-family housing. And at this point, I want to do a little audience participation. I'm looking in the room in person here first. Do any of you live in multifamily housing? No. Anybody online drive an EV and live in multifamily housing, an apartment or condo? Not seeing anybody raise your hand if you do, but I don't think any of you do. So kind of proving that it is difficult, not impossible, to live in multifamily housing and drive an EV. And that's what our mission is, to make it easier, more affordable. Recently, the lack of EV charging at home has surpassed concerns about driving range, concerns about cost, as being the top barrier that's preventing Americans from buying EVs. You can see that 77% of those surveyed said they were concerned about the lack of charging stations or home charging. And this is an issue that has been preventing apartment residents from accessing EVs unless they're like early adopters and very committed. There's been a lot of news in the press about that. Some of these stories we've helped to generate through our coalition and others just arising organically. And I'm going to share with you a 2-minute video that really is going to hammer home the difference between having charging at your own assigned charging spot that's directly wired to your panel or meter. That could happen whether you live in a single family home or if you're lucky in a multifamily home versus those that have to share chargers, even in a multifamily home setting. So let's hope this video will work from this link here. And if not, I can stop sharing the screen and access it another way.
How much does it cost to charge an electric vehicle? Well, it depends on the type of housing you live in. Meet Sven and Suzette. Each drive a Chevy Bolt EV, and they each drive about 14,000 miles per year. Neither of them ever pays for gas. Sven lives in a single-family home where he can charge in his driveway. Suzette rents an apartment and must rely on commercial EV charging stations installed at her complex. While Sven just pulls up and plugs in, Suzette often has to circle around and wait for a charging spot to open up. Sometimes she has to check back multiple times. Meanwhile, Sven is getting some work done while his car charges. His EV will be fully charged when he needs it in the morning. Suzette also has to move her car as soon as it's done charging to avoid an extra idling fee. When it comes to price, Suzette has to pay for a plan her landlord negotiated with a private charging company. She pays about $164 per month. That includes the cost of electricity plus an upcharge, a monthly access fee, and that idling fee if she doesn't move her car right away. And Sven, he pays about $55 a month for the extra electricity through his home power bill. Everyone deserves equal access to affordable EV charging. It shouldn't matter whether you live in a house, condo, or an apartment. There are lots of solutions, and together we can make a difference. If you'd like to help ensure affordable EV charging for all, please join us.
Just showing a little more to show you that we have a petition, which I'll be talking about. So we have it in English and Spanish. So yeah, did that just recap what you've already known, or did that show a little more about all the fees? Yeah.
Very effective, I would say.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, that was a brainchild of 3 of us on the EV Charging for All Coalition: Vanessa Warheit, Brigitte Racine, who helped produce it and helped create it, and myself. So we thought we needed to show it visually. So thanks for the good feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Lawrence. Yeah, we were just talking about Ron saying it's going to put up on Facebook. We do want to help spread the word. We'd love your help to spread the word of the video, because that's going to help us convince the decision makers that they actually should adopt the most equitable codes to remove that barrier to accessing regulated utility rates. So let me go back to sharing my screen and continue with the presentation.
Could I just add that though we live in a single family residence, we usually charge the EV at a commercial installation, i.e. my partner's workplace, which costs 3 times as much, because charging at home is rather difficult.
For in your situation, it's hard at home?
Yeah, because it's a rental, and
the
landlord hasn't been very friendly about adopting efficient technologies and whatnot. So to charge at home, we roll out a 100-foot extension cord from the garage in the back to the street, put a little ramp across the cord so the skateboards can get over and charge on the street.
Right.
And although it's 240 volts at 12 amps, the charger that came with the car, and it's perfectly adequate. It takes about 10 or 15 minutes to set up and 10 or 15 minutes to tear down. So it's not that convenient. So usually it gets charged at work.
Yeah, so you have a good point about it's not just single family residents, but especially if there's renters in single family homes, they also have a barrier. So thanks for pointing that out. And then I'm going to press on with the presentation and leave time at the end for questions and answers. But thanks for sharing your experience. And let me go back to sharing my screen here so you can follow along with the presentation. All right, so this chart just basically summarizes what you saw in the video, that the red part, the electricity upcharge, it really varies. So we have a member of our coalition who, when she moved into a condo in or apartment in Sunnyvale, she only had to pay 16 cents per kilowatt to charge, which is a pretty good rate for this area. But then a month or two into living there, she got a letter from her landlord saying, we're doubling the rates. And so she was pretty disappointed because that's one factor in the decision to rent there. And now what does she do? Break her lease or, have to start looking for a less expensive place. And so the fact that it's unregulated means it could cost up to 5 times as much to charge at a multifamily housing community than in a single family home. And then there's those idling fees, which are really annoying. Like if your baby's napping and your car's done charging, what are you supposed to do? Wake up the baby, bring the baby to the car to move it? Or do you risk getting those idling fees? And then some places even charge every time you plug in, you have to pay. So it's really inequitable. And we want, in our coalition, we want to make sure that multifamily residents can get the lowest cost unregulated utility rates. So some of what I said is already shared on here, but this chart vividly does, and I want to give a huge shout out to Dwight McCurdy and Dia Condra, who together did the research on looking into the pricing. So you can see how little it costs in a single family home, how much it can in a multifamily that can actually be more expensive than DC fast charging. As you all know, there's no place like home when it comes to charging. If you have direct wiring, you have the lowest cost electricity rates. It's the most convenient, reliable, and safest place to charge. So building codes are a vital piece of the picture because without having building codes that are aligned with accessibility and affordability, residents in multifamily housing will continue to be excluded from the regulated rates. And so I wonder how many here in the room know about cold water flats. Has anybody heard of that term? Nobody here. Yeah, it is. Well, it is last century, but actually up into the 1960s in our country, builders were allowed to build housing without hot water pipes. And this was frequently done in redlined neighborhoods where renters didn't have choice of where they lived because of their race, because of redlining, or their income. They had to live in affordable housing. And so the builders cut their costs by only installing cold water pipes. And the residents had to boil their water for every use, whether they were going to be cooking, cleaning, bathing. So it was like camping at home. And I can't believe until the 1960s, many cities in our country allowed this. And it wasn't until the city governments and the state governments said, we can't allow this substandard housing to go on. Everybody deserves hot water at home, that the building codes that were passed that made the builders have to put in hot water pipes. And they didn't like it. And they protested and they said, oh, it's going to cost too much money. Won't be able to build affordable housing. But I'm happy to say that, 160 years later, we have still having affordable housing built. And they have hot water and nobody second guesses that. So in our coalition, when we learned about this concept from Andrea Marpiero Colomina of Green Latinos, we decided we would bring this awareness to people about how important building codes are for equity. And we believe that yesterday's cold water flats are today's units that lack assigned directly wired EV charging. Thank you. So in our coalition, we also really do want to get housing built. We have no desire to make it so expensive that builders can't build housing. So we have a win-win philosophy, and not just philosophy, but we enact it in practice with very practical recommendations that try to maximize access to EV-ready charging for the residents, but also minimize the cost and complexity for the builders and managers, as well as for the residents and the rest of society. And we center equity, again, so that multifamily residents can get the same rates as single-family residents. Most of this audience that I'm speaking with already knows these technical details, but what I'm trying to show in this chart for you is why we recommend low power level 2 for multifamily charging. Everybody knows that DC fast charging is just for public charging. That's not a good thing to have it at your home. It's way too expensive and way overkill. But low power low level 2 is really a sweet spot because you can add about 114 to 150 miles overnight over a 10-hour dwelling time. And that is way more than adequate for most residents that drive about 30 to 40 miles a day. So we believe this is better because the full power level 2 at 40 amps is significantly more expensive for the builders because the biggest cost they have with charging is the kVA, the cost of the power. So you can cut that practically in half by going from 40 amps to 20 amps. And you still have enough range, like I said. So that's what we recommend in the code. And we also recommend EV ready. EV capable sounds great, but it doesn't mean EV capable. It means EV incapable at this moment. It means possibly, or yes, future capable if the resident can get their HOA or apartment manager's approval, hire an electrician, pull a permit, and pay for the upgrade. These are barriers that are really hard to overcome for a resident. And why would they do that if they're not even going to live there very long and move on? So we know that EV capable is inadequate in multifamily housing, and we're very happy to have convinced the state Housing and Community Development Agency to stop including EV capable and move it all to EV ready. So we recommend that EV ready be the type of charging that's installed. We actually don't think that EVSE, electric vehicle service equipment, is actually needed, the full chargers, because most vehicle models come with a cord set, or you can buy one that you can use to plug your vehicle in. And so that saves, again, the cost to the builder, but gives the residents access to power for charging. One more really important nuance, and this relates to San Jose's building code. So really hoping that you here today will help us advocate in San Jose. San Jose, like a lot of cities that are climate conscious, have decided to remove parking minimums, which means that apartments and condos built today don't have to have any longer a minimum ratio of apartment units to parking. You can have as much or as little parking as the builder desires. This is a great idea because it allows the residents, or allows the city to stop building overbuilt. We have too much parking, and it incentivizes people to try to get them around without cars. Biking, walking, public transit, those are all better for the environment and better for your pocketbook than owning a car. But we recognize that many people still in our car dependent society do need cars, and they will need a place to charge if they have an EV. And so what San Jose is done is it's incentivized unbundled parking for the builders. They get extra points. But when you have an unbundled parking space, you should be able to get assigned parking. You're paying extra. Unbundled means that you pay above your rent. It doesn't come with your rent. So the rent for the apartment where you live and
Very odd. I can keep my mouth moving.
could you mute Lawrence? We have a little background noise coming in. Or maybe you can mute Lawrence. Okay. So unbundled means that what you pay for your housing unit and what you pay for your parking is not bundled together anymore. It's separate. But that doesn't mean you can't get assigned parking. Usually if you pay more for a parking space, you do get assigned parking. So now I'm going to share the 4 components for equitable reach code. And Lawrence, if you hear us, can you, you're getting a bit of feedback. Thanks, Lawrence. Okay, great. So these are the 4 components. And for those here in person today, you will be able to take with you this beautiful bookmark with these 4 components on it to help us spread the word. And again, these are policy recommendations that have come out of 3 years of very deep engagement with the codes and deep engagement with the builders. We've talked with builders, we've talked with the apartment association, we've talked with residents, with all the different stakeholders, and come up with these 4, which we think is that policy. So first, every single household unit with parking should have at least 1 EV-ready charging space. And this ensures that all residents with parking can have access, and it doesn't require that the city have or the state have a parking minimum, but just whatever housing unit has parking, access to parking there, it needs to be EV-ready. Also, we want the codes to require, again, at least low power level 2. It doesn't have to be full power level 2, and EV receptacles, not necessarily the full charging stations. Again, this minimizes the cost to builders while providing access to adequate power for all residents. And then this is the key point that we are working on with City of San Jose. The receptacles should be wired directly to the corresponding household's panel or meter. And that is the key that enables the resident to get the same cost that Sven pays the single family residents. Because if you have direct wiring to your meter, There's no middleman, and it's now regulated by the CPUC. There's no third-party fees, no idling fees. You get the same you get the same low-cost time of use rates. And it's very important for your predictability of what you're going to have to pay for your charging. But this does require parking to be assigned, because you can't have a common meter that's wired to every resident's panel or meter. It's either one or the other. It's either on a common meter or it's on the resident's meters. So this is why it's very important that the code require that if you have parking, it be assigned to your unit. Again, this can be unbundled. It can be paid for separately. That's a separate issue. And we recommend that the builders install quick disconnect circuitry to enable the rerouting as needed. So if the resident in apartment A moves out, then the resident in apartment B, you can quickly, easily, without an electrician, unplug from the panel for parking space or parking space 1, could go from apartment A to apartment B, but only if they do that at the time of construction. So it's really important the code have guidance for this. And finally, we recommend prominent signage at each EV-ready space, because if there's not a big charging station that's recognizable to people, they might not realize that that little outlet on the wall, that is a place you can charge an EV. So we want there to be prominent signage so residents know if they have an EV, hey, I can plug in here, or if they don't, hey, I could plug in an EV here, maybe I should get one. So those are the 4 components, and I'm really happy to say that we have had great success at the EV Charging for All Coalition in getting the state housing code to adopt our principles. When we began back in 2020, only 10% of multifamily housing in the state was required, this is for new construction, was required to be EV capable. And Sven and Vanessa formed this coalition, as I mentioned, to what we thought would be just fixing the leaky pipe. Just stop building buildings that have to get retrofitted very soon. And we thought it'd be a simple matter of just showing the code writers, the regulatory agencies, that it wasn't equitable and there was another way. But it's taken quite a while, but we've gotten there in 3 years. So we first moved it to 40% access. They were going to only go to 20%, and we convinced them to go to 40% in 2021. And then we sponsored a bill and ran it through both houses of the state legislature, and we passed both houses with super majorities. But guess what our governor did? He vetoed it. And he said, we have to let our agencies handle this. So we went back to the agencies, and we brought in many, many residents. We had over 3,000 public comments, and they all said, you need to make this more equitable. So we were very happy that in this latest code update, there's an intervening code cycle in between every triennial. They're moving to 50% EV ready access. They usually just do like little typos in the code. They don't usually make big advances. But best of all, they're requiring that the parking receptacles and chargers be directly wired to each unit's panel or meter. So we were able to convince them of that. And now the draft triennial code update has been released that would take effect in 2026. It'll require 100% of new multifamily housing with parking to get EV-ready parking. So we're very happy about that. Now moving to the state level. So does anyone here in the room live in San Jose? Yes. Oh, great. Ben does. Okay. And I know YN on the call. Hi, YN. YN lives in San Jose. I live in San Jose. Lawrence, I think you said you're in Palo Alto. So, but it doesn't matter. You can help advocate anybody, because San Jose is a regional leader. But you can see on this chart that San Jose has fallen behind other local cities on their REACH code. When Mothers Out Front pushed them in 2019 to have 100% access, we actually didn't understand that EV capable was incapable. And so that big gray bar on San Jose's line, 70% of parking spaces today in San Jose and new multifamily housing have to be EV capable. But again, the resident has to then get permission to install a charger. They have to get an electrician, they have to get a permit, they have to run the wiring, it's expensive. Only 30% of San Jose's multifamily housing units newly built have to be EV ready from the start. So many other cities are way ahead of San Jose. And then on the far left of this, you can see where the state code is going to be 100% EV ready. So San Jose is where, being a little behind now, is trying to catch up. And basically their code, they've released a draft code that is going to be voted on January 30th. So just about 1 week from now. And it's going to require EV-ready charging for all multifamily units. So not just some EV access, including EV capable, but all EV-ready. So we're very happy that the city listened and is going to do EV-ready. And I do want to give a shout out to former Mayor Liccardo, because he did really champion this. We lobbied him and he pushed the city to study this. And they did, and they realized this is totally doable. And in fact, if you use low power level 2, this is less expensive for the builders than the EV capable at 40 full power level 2. Really good, yeah. And they also are requiring that each EV receptacle at an assigned parking space be directly wired. Of course, that is what the state's requiring as well, but they're getting in line with what the state's going to be requiring as of July 1st. But you can see that on the components, San Jose is getting an A on number 1, they're getting an A on number 2, but here's the problem. The draft reach code they released has an exemption from the direct wiring, not just for unassigned parking, which makes sense. If you're not going to have assigned, you can't directly wire, but they are exempting unbundled parking. That means that the developer has such an easy out. They just say, oh, we're unbundling the parking. They don't have to install any of that wiring to the residence panel or meter, and everyone's back in Suzette's situation of having price gouging. So we do want San Jose, we have a petition, and I'll show you in a minute the link to that. We want them to, at least at the very minimum, don't exempt unbundled parking. There's going to be a lot of unbundled parking in San Jose. But we also want them to require assigned parking. We think that that is very logical. And there's been arguments raised against it, but we've been able to counter them all. And of course, we need to have more prominent signage. They do recognize that they have the signage in there. So number 3 is what we're working on. We have a petition that asks them to require assigned parking and not to exempt the unbundled. And some people point out, like, isn't this going to be too expensive to the builder? And actually, San Jose hired a consultant that showed that the additional cost to directly wire rather than using the common meter is only 0.25% of total construction costs. So when people say, oh, but this will stop builders from building in San Jose, I say to them, if the builder can have the financing for 99.94%, is that the right? No, 74%, there we go, because it's a 0.26. If they can have that much of the funding raised, the additional 0.26% is not going to be the deal breaker. So we don't buy that argument. We know that housing is expensive, but it's not because of the direct wiring. So that is not an excuse for not doing it. And again, as I pointed out, under this new REACH code, builders are going to save money overall compared to the current REACH code. And it's really only fair for them to put some of that savings into doing the direct wiring. And if they don't, what they're saying, this is the cynical thing that I see happening, the developers have more political power than residents of new family multi-housing, because those residents in new multifamily housing, you can't find them. It hasn't been built. So we are trying to be their voice and say, from the experience of people we know who live in multifamily now, who have trouble charging and having affordability, we want the city to center those future residents' needs to have affordable charging and not center the developers' needs to maximize every bit of profit. Yes, again, we want the housing to be built, but we want it to be the place where the residents can have access to charging. And so here are the 3 ways that you can get involved with Silicon Valley EVA and your friends and neighbors. We have a petition. We have it both in English and Spanish, and it has those same 2 asks. So you could take out your phones and you can scan that code, or you can use those bit.ly links. And I will send an email after to Ben. So Ben, you could spread it on the email list. But if anybody here isn't on the email list, I want to make sure you have access to that. And also, we're urging folks to come in person or to call in on Zoom or phone on January 30th. For those that don't work during the day, the meeting is, anybody can call in even if you're at work, but it's going to be especially easy if you don't have a full schedule at work, because it's probably going to be heard in the mid to late afternoon. But if you want to call in from work, we will put you on a list to be texted at the time and say, okay, say it's 3:45. They're going to start this item in about 5 minutes. It's time to log in. So you don't have to watch the whole meeting. So please sign up to give a comment. And if you can't do it live, you actually can send your comment to the city ahead of time. It's open to anybody. Yeah. Yeah, you can walk into the city council meeting, and if you sign up here, we'll send you instructions about where to park. Probably we'll try to find also the bus route. So YN, maybe you can help me do that. We can research what bus route gets off right at the city hall for those that come in by bus. But yeah, we'd love if people come in person ideally, because it shows the council in your face. Like, here are these people. We'll have signs. We really want you to do this, but calling in by phone and Zoom is also helpful. Oops, I skipped one. Oh no, that's right. This is the 3rd one. So also, if you'd like to get involved with our coalition, we are advocating not just in San Jose. I'm going to write the one ahead. not just in San Jose, but also in other cities and in the state to keep putting the pressure for this code that we hope they'll adopt, and nationally. So that that bit.ly EV access is a sign-up form that you can let us know how you might get involved. And finally, we're going to ask, it's now SVEVA, we're going to ask you to sign a sign-on letter from different organizations. We'll share it with you early next week, and we'd love to have you show your support. So you have a question, Ben?
Yeah, wanted to mention that we've got 5 minutes left in the Zoom meeting. So what I want to suggest is before we transition to Q&A, that we just stop the Zoom meeting and then we can start it up again. And that way we get another 40 minutes if we need it.
That sounds great. I really probably have lots of questions.
I'll just end the meeting, then with the leaving you with the message, don't walk away, just give me a couple minutes and then try joining the meeting again using the same link that you did before. So we're just going to have a brief, call it a bathroom break or something. We'll be right back.